What's today? Wednesday. Happy Wednesday, everybody. If you're watching me live in April of 2023, if you're not, happy whatever day it is for you, watching this as a replay. I am your host and your teacher and your spiritual guide. My title, I guess, is Soul Coach Michelle, as you can see below. You are a friendly neighborhood super woo and co-creative life coach. And today is lesson 2 of our 3-lesson series called Learning to Love Your Shadow, where we talk about shadow work not having to be scary, overwhelming, and just plain icky. In fact, it can be fun, it can be challenging, but we can do it in a fun way that's fascinating. And you can do it with some friends that, when you're in a safe container, help and support your journey. And that's what we're going to talk about. So, yesterday we talked about, or in the last lesson, we talked about, depending on when you're watching this, we talked about what is your shadow? And your shadow basically is, I call it a shadow closet, but it is the part of you. It is part of who you are, just like other, archetypal things within ourselves. It's the part of us that we like to hide, not so much because we want to, but more because someone else in our journey, whether it was when we were a little child or in our teenager years, um, told us something, and we learned that we shouldn't like whatever that is, and into the closet it went. And then our closet just kind of gets, much like house closets, get a little bit cluttered up with our shadow stuff. And doing shadow work is how we declutter that closet. But today we're going to talk about, where did your shadow come from? So a little more deeply about, where did it come from? So just like yesterday, I have another quote that I love from some of Debbie Ford's work, where she actually quotes another person called Robert Bly. And he describes the shadow as an invisible bag that each of us carries around on our back. As we're growing up, we put in the bag every aspect of ourselves that is not acceptable to our family and friends. Bly also believes that we spend the first few decades of our life filling up the bag, and then the rest of our life trying to retrieve everything we've hidden away in the bag. How familiar? Have you not seen that meme? It's like from 0 to 20, you're learning how to be what everyone else wants you to be. And then once you hit 20, 30 years old, you're like trying to unprogram yourself from all the crap that you learned. So that's kind of the same. That's where all that comes from. So, where does our shadow come from? As Robert Bly said, it is, a lot of it starts in our childhood, right around the time we probably go into kindergarten, because it's at that point we are, let out of the cage, we're let out of the house in public, and we have to behave in a certain manner. It usually starts in childhood, and well-meaning, adults who love us. I mean, most of the time it's adults who love us, trying to teach us how to not how to conform and how to do things in the right way, quote unquote. But a lot of times, this is all based on their own lens, their own fears, and those all get in the way when they're trying to teach us stuff. Like, for instance, I don't know about you, but in the work that I do, since I am fourth generation intuitive medium, there's Italian folk magic and a shamanism that I am learning about, that I didn't realize that's what was going on when I was a child, with my grandmother trying to teach me stuff. And now I just thought it was some sort of, like, this is what Italians do. And apparently it's like an actual, there's actual a name and all this kind of stuff. It's really cool that I'm learning all this stuff. But anyways, you know, growing up in the kind of family that I grew up in, um, doing reading tea leaves and cards, and doing healings on people, energy work, that we now call it. Back then there wasn't really a term, it was just like woo woo magic stuff, um, and holistic living and all that kind of stuff, that's very like what people call like woo woo, and which is now actually coming into the mainstream. But a lot of that stuff was so open and accepted in my family, and I thought it was like that for everybody. And so, but when I first started doing this from a coaching perspective, what I found out was that a lot of folks, maybe you, a lot of folks really just did not have that same experience. They maybe, especially here in the South, they grew up in very strict religious families. that told them, even though they had gifts and the gifts were in their family line, because that's generally how it works, that they were evil or they were bad or they were naughty, and like, that they were not of God and all this kind of stuff, and that they needed to shut that away and turn off their gifts, and otherwise, they would go to hell or something. And what that really translates into in shadow work language is when you're told that your gifts are not acceptable, your spiritual gifts are not acceptable in the tribe, in your family, in your church group, in any of that stuff, because it's just not what's done. And that you realize other members of your family are having those same gifts, but they're also shutting them away. It's almost like, okay, I got to shove this in my shadow closet because it's not appropriate or safe for me to practice these things, because they're bad. And that's where stuff like that comes from. And so what happens is, you may um, have feelings, but you say nothing about them, right? And so when left unchecked, these things can be triggered really easily in everyday life. So, like, you might have gifts, but you don't say anything, and then you feel guilty because you didn't say. Like, there's all this kind of stuff that happens, and there might be anger there. There might be anger at not being able to use your gifts, for instance. But you obviously also know, well, if my, honor thy parents, honor thy mother and father, and all that business. So we're like, well, I can't be angry at them. So what happens? You might be driving in traffic, and somebody cuts you off, and is like, and just right then and there, it's not the exact same situation, but the latent anger that's hanging out in your shadow closet because of this stuff that's being shoved in there pops out. Like yesterday, I talked about the beach ball analogy. You can hold everything down under the water, anger, shame, guilt. But at some point, if you're tired and somebody cuts you off in traffic, boom, anger pops out. And we flip them by the bird or call them a name or something of that nature. And there's stuff that happens worse. Like, notice all the videos coming out of people just acting in ways that all of us are appalled at. In fact, I guarantee you, when they get home and see their behavior on camera on the screen, they probably are appalled too at some level, because they're like, "Oh man, that's not me." Or they get like, "Well, of course I'm angry. That person, blah blah blah." Their beach balls popping up. So, you know, that's why navigating all of this shadow work stuff, it's stuff that does need to be addressed and does need to be worked on. Um, and decluttering our shadow closet is something, it's probably the best work you can do. And quite frankly, and people don't realize this, I think honestly, decluttering that shadow closet, all the stuff we talk about in woo woo land, all of the journeys and the paths and all that business, all of it is a form of shadow work because you're trying to get to the core of healing up our wounds. Nobody is broken, okay? Nobody is broken. We're just wounded and we're healing those wounds. Now, I do want to kind of take a pause and put like a parentheses at either end of the next thing that I'm going to talk about, because I do think it's really important. Um, and that is, who you do your shadow work with depends on what kind of shadow work you're doing. Okay. And I want to be really clear about that because, as you know, I've mentioned in the first video, I'll talk about it. In this video, I'll talk about it in the third video. And if you're on the email list, you're getting emails about it. I am offering, starting in May, sign up is open right now. It'll run through next week for the circle. The circle is where probably 8 to 10 women is probably where I'm going to max it out. Small group circle of women who will do meditation journeys, guided, and I call them guided journey meditations because they're not guided meditations where we're doing, like grounding work or this work. That might be a part of it, but the journey is more journeying inward with several of your guides, which you will meet, and your shadow, which you will meet. It's as a being in your spirit team. And people don't think of it that way, but your shadow loves you and your shadow is part of your spirit team. And how do we converse with that part of our spirit team? I think that's kind of a cool thing. So those kinds of things are going to be going on in the circle. And then talking through with those spirit guides, what do I need? What nourishment do I need to do to heal any of these wounds? Now, I will be honest and open. I am not a clinician. I am not a therapist. I have lots of degrees and lots of certifications, and doctor and clinician are not one of them. So where I am at with shadow work, I'll speak to in a little bit. What I like to call it is, and I want to, before I say this, I want to preface with I honor everybody's trauma. I honor everybody's journey. The way I'm describing trauma in the next few minutes is not based around the validity or invalidity of somebody's trauma, or if someone's trauma is worse than someone else's. Everybody's experience is their own. Okay, I want to put that way, but I'm utilizing certain language so that we can differentiate when to work with a coach, somebody like me, and when to work with a clinician or a therapist, a licensed therapist. Because there's a lot of coaches, I think, out there doing this kind of work that, unless they are trained, and or have clinical background, they need to be clear about what they're doing and how they're doing it. So I want to say this. So there's what I call big T trauma and little t trauma. Now, again, not saying one is better or worse than the other, but there are degrees, and that's how I differentiate them. So let's say big T trauma are things that not everyone goes through. Okay. We all go through traumas in our life to some degree, but there are different degrees. And I want to differentiate between those. So what I want to talk about is the difference between big T trauma and little T trauma. So big T trauma, these are things like physical and mental abuse, like as a child, like we talk about child abuse or domestic violence or any kind of physical or mental abuse that happens where there is somebody that is a predator and somebody that is a victim, okay? Sexual assault, addictions to drug or alcohol, sometimes witnessing someone be harmed or having a loved one die tragically, those kinds of things, those really, really deep traumas and wounds that precipitate reactions that might actually create addictions or can lead to PTSD. So people that, are newly out of the military or have witnessed tragic things like and in this day and age that might be a school shooting or a public shooting, something of that nature, stuff that's really going to affect you like that, like a big traumatic incident. That's a big T trauma. Again, like physical and mental abuse, whether it be child abuse, sexual abuse, domestic abuse, that kind of stuff. So that's big T trauma in my book. Those kinds of traumas, I want to be really clear, they do create stuff being shoved into your shadow closet because there's shame and guilt and blame and anger, and it's really intense. And that kind of stuff, I would encourage you to work more with a licensed therapist, social worker, psychiatrist, psychologist, that kind of person, that can help give a voice to all those things for you in a way that is going to be more clinically based. Now, I will be transparent. I do have clients that are both in therapy and utilizing the coaching that I do because they are two different things. And they have found that when we open up a little bag of stuff in the uh, shadow closet, that they know this is not the place that we're going to talk about it because it's a big T trauma. But the interesting thing is, and what folks have said is, it's really cool because now they feel safe to go and talk about it with their therapist. So that's the only way that I would invite that. But what I would say is this. I want to be totally transparent. I That is not my zone of genius. Big T trauma is something that I honor. I intend every day that it no longer happens to anyone on this planet, but I know that it does. And I'm going to encourage you to seek the proper clinical help with that. So that's kind of the framework that I want to put around this. The other thing is I want to talk a little bit about little T trauma, which to me, little T trauma is stuff that all of us go through. Again, varying degrees, because we might have a lot of, like, Gen Xers. If you watch some of the real Slim Sherry on, I think, Instagram, she's hilarious. She talks about being a Gen Xer all the time. We joke about, like, we totally, like, were in our zone during the pandemic, not because of all of the yucky parts, but because we're all like, snacks in my house, in my PJs, on my own, doing my thing where nobody's looking after me and I get to watch all my shows. Yes, this is reminiscent of my childhood. You know, to me, like some folks can look at that and be like, well, that could be traumatic because you're a latchkey kid growing up. Especially Gen X parents, which I guess are boomers or something like that. Um, we were told a lot about like, you work hard, a day's work for a dollar and all that business. So there was a lot of programming going on. But a lot of that is little t trauma, in my opinion. So that usually starts happening when we go to kindergarten or nursery school, depending on when you started school. Because at that point, it's like, okay, this child's ready for prime time. We're going to send them out into the world, and uh, and we're going to teach them how to be. And so that's when the programming begins, when you start your schooling and you're told by your parents how to behave, then you're told by your teachers how to behave. Generally, out in society, especially when you start acting up, you're told how to behave. Um, it might be by a religion, like I said earlier. Some people, when they're young, they have their gifts start emerging. And if they come from a very strict religious background, that can get really ugly by being told some things about your gifts aren't of God, yada yada yada. My personal opinion is they are, and I was raised in a much different family. But all that stuff can go in the closet. It can even be like, just like I told you yesterday in the other video, being called a chatterbox as a young child could make you clam up, and then next thing you know, you can't even do public speaking in high school, even though it might be a required course because somebody in your childhood told you that. And that's, you know, one of the things that hinders us. That to me is little t trauma, stuff like that. Again, trauma is not equated per this one against that one, kind of thing. But to me, I feel like there are big things that happen to certain people that don't happen to everyone. And then there's stuff that all of us go through, which is the little t trauma to me is the programming that we need to work through. And one of the examples I like to share about what that looks like and the stuff that I work with people with is, so an example of the little t trauma. It's kind of a conversation. It came up in a conversation I had with a client who is an amazing writer. I mean, she is so phenomenal. In fact, she's so phenomenal. She writes all kinds of things, and she also does channeled writing, which is kind of cool. And one of her favorite genres, though, is that fantasy fiction, like Outlander or, Game of Thrones or that kind of stuff. And she doesn't write it. It's like the one thing she doesn't write. And I was like, one day I was like, why not? Because we were talking about her getting back into her writing, and I was encouraging her in that. And I think she was like in seventh or eighth grade. She said she remembered this. Now, mind you, she's in her 30 something, like mid to late 30s. She remembers eighth grade. So how old are we in eighth grade? Like, I don't know, 14, something like that. Anyway, so one of the big assignments in her favorite creative writing class was to write a short story. So of course she got really excited. She's going to write this short story, and the what came out of her was this amazing story, with a heroine and wizards and dragons and all the things, like all the Game of Thrones things that are really popular today. Game of Thrones is what? It's like it had a bazillion seasons and then it's got a spin-off series now and all this kind of stuff. So, and people love that kind of stuff and Outlander and all that business. So, and she was absolutely thrilled with how her short story came out. And she took it to the teacher and she was like, and she was so super happy until she got it back and it said, "See me" at the top. Now, I think all of us remember that. Like, as soon as I said that, you probably were like, ugh, cringe. Whenever you saw like red ink that said "see me" on the top of your paper, you knew that's not good. And she went and saw her teacher, and the teacher told her, even though her story was well crafted and her writing was superb, the genre was ridiculous and beneath her. And she wanted her to choose another genre and topic and redo the assignment. Do you know that when I spoke with her, like I said to her, so this was in eighth grade, and I spoke with her 25 years later. We're talking about this, and she still hadn't put pen to paper for a fantasy genre ever since that moment. And of course, we kind of worked through that and worked on that, and she's doing some really awesome stuff now. But the fact is that because someone else's fear or belief told her something was unacceptable, that got shoved in her shadow closet, and her light got shoved in the shadow closet and was dimmed. So that's a little T trauma in my like, and I think we all have those stories. I have stories like that. Like I remember telling a relative that I wanted to be a singer, and they said to me, only 20% of people make it, and that 20% probably doesn't include you. Could you imagine telling that to a 13-year-old child? That's when that happened. And we all have those. That's the kind of stuff in the shadow closet that I like to work in. That's where I can help you. So, those are the little t traumas, those kinds of things that our shadow tries to protect us from. Because we got to remember, the shadow loves us and it doesn't hate us. It's not bad. It's not negative. It's just where we shove all the things that we're told are inappropriate for us to do into this little closet. And the thing is, this is where a light worker like me shines. That's my job when I think about it. When someone says, "What do you do?" And I say, "Oh, it depends on who I'm with." If it's with a muggle, I'm like, "Oh, I'm a life coach," because to get into this deep weediness, that's different. But if I'm talking to somebody like you guys that get it, I am the light worker. I walk in and I hold your hand and we walk into that shadow closet. We break that darkness. That's my sweet spot and my jam right here. This is where I can work with you and we can work together. You know, I also have clients, like I said before, that, they may have the therapist and me at the same time. And the stuff we work on here shines a light on something they bring to therapy. And that's great. But again, I want to be really clear. You're a big T trauma. Work with your therapist first, and then we can work together. But if you are, which I think a lot of us are, and you can really differentiate here, I think a lot of us are dealing with these small T traumas, these like, yeah, Audrey, right here. She says, we never realize how much words can change the trajectory of our lives. And those words from people we trust, people that are our teachers, people that love us. I mean, I don't think that my client's teacher was trying to be mean or whatever. She saw this spark, this light in her, and was like, if you want to make money, you're going to have to write this way or about this topic. You can't be writing this wishy-washy crazy stuff that now, which isn't it ironic that now it's like the hugest franchise ever. Um, but the thing is that when those kinds of things happen, that's the stuff that we dig around and we need to dig up and bring light to and be like, is it true? Is that really true? Or can I come and this is my gem. Your shadow came from various experiences and outcomes and people's reactions to those experiences that you witnessed as good or bad. And then you had to decide whether or not to continue with your behavior based on the approval of other people, not based on whether you enjoyed the activity or not. That's sucky as an adult. Like as a kid, growing up, yeah, we had to because, we lived in our parents' houses and we had this circle of friends and we maybe went to a certain church or a synagogue or something of that nature. And we had these tribes that we belonged to and we didn't want to get kicked out of them, so we created this persona that didn't include all of these things that we like to do or like to be because other people thought out of their own fear that it was inappropriate, you couldn't bring it to the group. Okay, now the interesting thing is though that all that stuff you shoved in the closet, those were gems, probably. Like, they were creative pieces of you, and a lot of folks think, "Oh, I'm not creative, I don't draw." It's not about drawing or painting. Creativity is how you look at the world. It might come out as music, it might come out as art, it may come out as writing, it may come out in your culinary work, in your kitchen. It may come out because you're some sort of medical professional. It may come out as somebody who, just knows how to be creative in their teaching methods so that they can connect with untraditional students. Creativity is one of those things that gets hidden away in the closet, in the shadow closet, because we're told not to do that. I mean, like, that's, think about it for a minute. Like, when Adele came out, she didn't sound like all the other, like, Mariah Careys of the world. She sounds like Adele. You know her voice when she starts singing. She's got so many Grammys, she needs a shopping cart to drive them around. But what if someone back in the day, before she went to the performing arts high school she went to, told her she was either a crappy singer or a crappy songwriter, and she believed him, and then she didn't do any of it? We wouldn't have that gift. I mean, there's so many people that turn on our music like when like shit's hitting the fan or they want to like rock out and have that, energy of like uplift or, or commiseration or whatever it is that you need to feel in that moment. They turn to her stuff and she wrote it and performed it. I mean, like, and what if somebody told her, don't do that? And she listened. What if somebody told Steve Jobs dropping out of college and going off to find himself in India would lead him to flipping burgers for a living? And he believed them. Well, I know for one thing, I would not be sitting here doing this live stream on my MacBook Pro. That's for damn sure. And I certainly wouldn't have an iPhone. And I certainly wouldn't have an iPad. And if you have any of those things, think about that. If somebody told him doing the stuff that he needed to do to find himself and to get on with his shining his light was bullshit, and he listened. What if someone told Mother Teresa that the slums of Calcutta were too dangerous for her and that she and her little nun team needed to go someplace safer to help people? And she believed him. You never would have heard of that woman. You never would have heard of her story. You never would have heard of her wisdom. You never would have been inspired by her. And if you're too young to know who she is, Google her. Mother Teresa. You don't need a last name. That's all you need. Shows up, I swear to God. The thing is, the reason why I created this lesson series, the reason why I'm creating the circle that starts at the end of the month is because it is so necessary to do this work. And there are so many people out there telling you how scary and overwhelming and just hard and challenging and oh my God, it's awful shadow work is. Can it be challenging? Yes. Will you cry? Maybe. I cry sometimes too. And the thing is, it's funny. Sometimes people cry and they're laughing while they're crying because they're releasing stuff. Crying isn't just about being like, oh my God. It might be, oh my God, this is so beautiful. And getting okay with that. That's shadow work. Shadow work can be fun. I find it fascinating. That's why I call it fun and fascinating. And I'm doing it with trusted friends, in a container where you have other women around you that are going to support you. That's the coolest part because you get to do your individual journey. That's how I designed this whole thing. You do your individual journey during the group session, and then you come back to the group and celebrate and share and do what, and we do things that are supportive in a group setting, but individually based, which I think is really cool. And that's why I'm doing that because there's so many gems within you. There's so many things within you that because they're sitting in your shadow closet and somebody has told you another thing that's probably in your shadow closet. Somebody has told you don't open the fucking closet. Don't open it. Don't you dare because there is too much crap in there that somebody's going to get upset about. Even though if you opened it and you actually turn the light on, you'd be like, "Oh my God, like I don't know about you, but we're starting to like declutter to move. We've been decluttering for like a year." You open the closet and you're like, "Oh my God, I totally forgot this was in here." That's where this has been this whole time. There was a book a friend gave me like 2 years ago that I found the other day, and I was like, "Oh my God." And then I read it and it's awesome. And now Darren's run off with it. So I mean, the stuff that you find in your shadow closet could be the stuff that helps you leave your corporate job, that helps you turn around your business, that helps you reconnect to your soul purpose. It might help you reconnect to your family, even though they might be the ones that told you to put it in there in the first place. But now that everybody's older and wiser, hopefully, you know, people realize that they're gems for you. That shadow is a locked treasure chest of your inner wisdom, your joy, and your authenticity. And isn't it about time you unlocked it and remembered what it felt like to be 100% you so that you could bring that out to the world? Because a lot of times, like I'll tell you right now, my shadow was like screaming, "The hell are you doing? Don't be talking about this." Or my itty bitty shitty committee, which is like when I was having the beach ball that pops up. Don't be doing this 3 lesson thing. Don't be doing this. What are you doing? Because now you're going to have to face all your crap. Well, the fact is that, yeah, I do. And the more I look at it, and the more I shine lights on it, and the more I have my trusted circle around me, it helps me shine those lights on that stuff and bring it out. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been talking about entitlement, in my last email. I told my trusted circle that scared the shit out of me to bring that out and talk about what I thought entitlement was, because it has nothing to do with your social security money if you're in the US. It has nothing to do with political shit, and everything to do with how you deal with change, which is not a normal, again, a a run of the mill way to see what entitlement is. And if we can own it, like that's something I've been owning your entitlement. And I'm not talking about it from, like, again, like where people say, oh well, you know, the entitlements, whether it's money or who you are and that kind of stuff. It's more about expecting the world to stay the same so you feel comfortable. It's not about, oh, I want something. It's about, oh, well, why did they change the aisles in the grocery store? What genius did that? Well, maybe, like, and it was funny that that all happened this week. Um, I wrote all about that, and I talked even to some folks on social about it. And then today I went to the grocery store because it's Wednesday. It's my day because I'm entitled to go on Wednesdays. I can go on Tuesday, but I like Wednesdays. It's a lot quieter. And they have the double specials. Anyways, I get over there, and there's this lovely old man, or older gentleman, I should say. And we kept getting in each other's way. And one of the conversations we had was about how they have so much new stuff and how great it is to have to be an explorer in the store. And he thought that was such a great way to look at things, even though the store was a little trafficky. So it's all about, you know, reaching in and saying to yourself, it's okay to talk about stuff. Like, for me anyway, that was a thing that I was having trouble with. Was part of, somebody said, be quiet, only talk about crystals and spirits and tarot cards, and pull cards and stay in your lane and pull cards. And I was like, that's not what I'm supposed to be doing, man. I got a long history of people that help heal people, and some of it was physical, and I feel mine is more on a spiritual, like helping you reconnect and healing that connection between you and your soul. And this is one of the ways that I need to do it, and that means opening my shadow closet door too. And so part of this is actually selfish. I get to circle up with a group of wonderful, amazing women that choose to join me come the end of this month, and we get to explore in such a different way how we shine a light on all the things that have been holding us back and actually turn them into the gems that will be the light that we shine in the world. I think that's so amazing. But to kind of circle this up, pardon the pun, today's lesson was all about, where did it come from? Be honest, it comes from people that love us, that wanted the best for us. But again, they were coming from a place of fear because they didn't know. Maybe they weren't, maybe there was a different perspective, but I mean, even in my family, like I talked about, where woo-woo stuff was totally accepted and taught, the interesting thing was I used to be a lefty when I was a kid. My grandmother made me, same grandma, she made me write with my right hand because in her belief system, that's what you did. You didn't write with your left hand. Oh, no, no, no. We're going to do this Italian folk magic. You got to do it with your right hand, which I thought was interesting looking back. The one person who was fully accepting of all, like, the weirdness, the special gifts, all the things, that was one of her things. And now I'm a righty. I do both, actually. I can function on both hands, but it took some time. But I think that that's interesting. And so as we explore those things and we learn to bring out those gems, that's where the light starts shining and we bring stuff out of the darkness. We might always, I would venture to say, we'll always have a shadow closet and we'll always be decluttering. But I mean, like, let's think about it. When you're in your house, every closet you tidy up, and like within a year, it sometimes gets cluttered up again. So it's an ongoing process. But I think doing this in a circle of people on your own, but with the support and safety of a group, is so helpful. I know I find it that way, and that's why I want to share it with you. And where did this all come from? Like I said, it came from the well meaning friends, family, group members of, maybe your church or your book club or whatever thing you belong to that you hang out at, whatever tribes you hang out in. Usually that's where it comes from. But those same people probably, on second thought, like Audrey was said earlier, you know, they didn't realize what their words did. And in all honesty, if they did, they probably would be like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that got put in your in your shadow closet because of me." And releasing that is a huge thing. So that's what we're going to do in the circle tomorrow. I hope this was helpful. And tomorrow we're going to have our last lesson, which is going to be what is shadow work? What does that look like? So I'm going to be describing more what'll be what do I see it as shadow work? What have I done in these circles before so that you can know what we do and also like what, if you find that again, I'm one of those coaches, I'm not like buy my shit, buy my shit. It's much more like if it works, if this sounds like it's going to call to you, I would love to see you in there. If I am not for you, I want you to be, I want to be really clear. That's okay. I'm not like your regular I'm not, I could run through a list of Hay House teachers and all that kind of stuff that I'm probably not like them. I cuss and I swear, as you probably have noticed. Um, I call it like I see it. And if spirit tells me something, I don't hold back because I've learned not to do that because they scream at me because I think they're like from, my Brooklyn relatives that are my spirit team. But if it is for you, I would love to see you in there because I think that's where the work is done. So we'll talk about what shadow work is tomorrow, my definition, not the scary, my definition, and what it entails. And you could try it on your own. You could try it in the group. I would love to see you there if that feels right for you. But until then, again, if you're watching this in a replay and you have a question about anything that I've done, and if you're with me live, because there's been a couple of you here live, um, if you have questions about anything I've said, please feel free to post a comment and let me know what that is and put hashtag replay so I can come back and answer it for you. If you're watching live and you're like, oh, I have a question, I just don't remember, I didn't remember to ask it, you can go ahead and do that too. And other than that, I will see you tomorrow. Remember, if you are on the mailing list, you will get all the replays emailed into your inbox to remind you if you want to watch them again for any reason, plus some other information. I'm just sharing my 3-step process that I use in that email chain or email that I'm going to be sending out Friday, Monday, and through next week. The 3-step process that I use to interact with my shadow. I'm also going to be sending out a meditation, a clearing, grounding, shielding meditation, which is helpful for when you're doing this work during next week. So if you want any and all of that and these replays, make sure that you are on my email list. If you are not, you can go to soulcoachstudio.com, which is right here. If you go there and you scroll all the way to the bottom, there should be a little thing to sign up on the email list, and you can go ahead and do that. And if that, for whatever reason, doesn't work, please go ahead and just ping me and say, "Hey, Michelle, can you put me on the list?" I will do it myself. I have an in at my own place. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this was helpful and supportive of your journey. And I hope to see you tomorrow in the next video. And if you catch me in the replay, our energies will connect whatever way they do. And until then, I will see you in the vortex. Have a great rest of your day. I love you so much. Mwah. Bye, y'all.